And to store the username, we need to do something after the user was created here, because that's important. For creating a user with email and password, we really can't just store that data. But of course, once we got a user created, we can reach out to the Firestore database and store extra user data there if we want to. So we can simply go here after the if-else statement, but still inside of the try block, because the code I'm about to execute should only run if this was successful, not if we had an error. So here inside of the try block, I will now use Firestore. Not Firebase auth, but Firestore. So for that, let me import package Cloud Firestore.dart, the package I showed you a few minutes ago already. And then after logging in or after signing up, I want to use Firestore.instance to store extra user data. And actually not after logging in or signing up, but only after signing up. So let's move this into the else block. This should only run if we signed up, not if we did log in. So here, we can now call collection to reach out to a collection and reach out to the user's collection. This collection doesn't exist yet, but it will be created on the fly, so we don't have to create it ahead of time. And there we can target a specific document. And I want to create a document which uses the ID of my user as an ID. Normally, if you add a document with the add method, a new ID is generated dynamically. I don't want that here. I want to use an existing ID. I want to use my existing user ID as an ID in this user's collection. And you can do that by using the document method and then by passing the ID you want to use as an argument to this method. And here that's authResult.user.uid. So this authResult object here has a user object, which then has a UID field, which is that user ID that was generated for the user by Firebase. And on this document, we can then call setData to store extra data for that document. This is just the identifier of the document. Here comes the extra data. Now, as mentioned before, the extra data you store in a document is a map here in Flutter, and you can have any key value pairs you want. So I'll add the username key, and the value is username, so the value stored here in this argument. And I will also store the email again, just to have it there in this document as well. And with that, we're adding a new user to the new users collection when we sign up a new user. So we simply manage this extra user data here on our own. Now setData returns a future, so we can also await this here to then, for example, clear some loading indicator if we had one, or do whatever we want to do once we're done with that. Before we manage any loading indicator, let me, however, save this and actually delete this user account here, just so that I can reuse this email address. And then I'll click sign up again here. Now, if we refresh, this user will be recreated. But now if we go to database, we'll see a new users collection here. And in there, we see one document with this ID. And in there, we have the email and the username. So that's this extra data which was stored. And now with that, just to finish up this authentication process, I think it would be a bit nicer if this sign up button would be replaced with a loading spinner, or maybe both buttons would be replaced with a loading spinner whilst we're waiting for a result. And we can easily add such a functionality by going to the off screen, and we have a stateful widget here, so we can manage some state here in off screen state. Bar is loading, could be false initially, and we want to set this to true whenever we start logging in or whenever we start signing up. So I'll set state here at the beginning of the try block and set is loading equal to true. And is loading should be set back to false if we have an error. So here at the end of both catch blocks, I'll call set state and set is loading back to false. So let's grab this and also add it here. And it should also be set to false here in the success case that we actually added this extra user data. But we don't need to do this here because we'll soon navigate the user somewhere else anyways. So we don't have to do that here. Now, one thing we of course do have to do is we have to utilize this isLoading state. So here to auth form, I'll actually pass isLoading. And inside of auth form, we now need to accept this. So here in auth form, I add a second property which I want to get here. Boolean isLoading, which is set through the constructor like this. And then in our widget tree, which is being rendered, here we can replace the raised button and the flat button with a loading indicator. For that, we could check if widget isLoading is true, and if that is the case, I will render a circular progress indicator. And the raised button should be removed, so if not widget is loading, this button should show up, and therefore it's removed if we are loading. And I apply the same logic to the flat button here. So the two buttons are only showing if we're not loading. If we are loading, I show the circular progress indicator instead. So if I save this and click on sign up, you see the loading spinner, and then here I get an error because I already used this email address, but you see that the loading spinner works, and that's great. So with that out of the way, we got that working, we got the extra data stored. Now let's make sure that we actually move the user to the chat screen if we are authenticated.